Well, hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. Considering that I stated well earlier on in the project earlier this year that zombie films aren't a subgenre that I have a particular interest in, I seem to have found myself covering a lot of zombie films. I don't know quite why that's happened. It might be because of the trend in the last decade towards zombie films being sort of the popular horror genre, although in terms of genre fiction, we seem to be going more towards time loops and time travel at the moment. But zombies obviously have spent a long time being at the forefront of storytelling, particularly with things like The Walking Dead. And so, of course, it's a it's a medium by which people can try and tell various different stories and inject their own particular style to. Although I do think we are coming to the end of that particular trend. I do think in, say, the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to see a real drop in zombie fiction. Because we're at that point now where a film like today's, which is Jim Jarmusch's The Dead Don't Die, it could be accused to me that I have a particular love for metafiction and the idea of genre analysis contained within the story that I'm watching. One of my favourite films of all time is Cabin in the Woods, and I love Shaun of the Dead, and even Scream I have a great admiration for. I do like the self-reflexive analysis and breaking down of the genre, of the horror genre. Even outside of horror, I like the idea of a film or a director almost examining the story that they are telling, but not at the cost of the story itself. And so when you have a film like The Dead Don't Die, and you can tell that it is Jim Jarmusch's desire to analyse zombie storytelling, and even more than that, sort of look at the horror comedy subgenre or hybrid genre and kind of deconstruct it in his own particular brand. That being said, and I can see entirely why when this first came out people were hugely conflicted about it, and it is critically mixed at best, because if you look at it in terms of a story of, this is a comedy horror about zombies starring Adam Driver and Bill Murray, and it's set in a small town, and you think, okay, on one level the plot mechanics could be very simple, and as I've talked about before, even as yesterday when I was talking about going in style, it's the fact that there's nothing worse than having a film that doesn't feel like it's adding a particular voice to it. And going in style, is as I said, a competently made film. It just felt like it wasn't adding anything new to the conversation of its themes and ideas, and it didn't feel like Zach Braff's particular directorial voice was hugely in the body of the text. And so to make that the criticism of that, and then to see this where Jim Jarmusch is so making the film not about what it's about and more about his strange vision and understanding of this kind of plot, it's hard to digest, because it's none of the things that you would want it to be. This, frankly, isn't funny at all. It's not a good comedy. Because it's so weird and meta and fourth wall breaking in a way that's almost, is less like Deadpool and more like Donald Glover's Atlanta, where its characters, they do actively break the fourth wall, which they don't do in Atlanta, but they do it more in a way as if they're being punished for it, as if that's not something they're not supposed to be doing, and they're aware of that, as opposed to Deadpool, where it's, actively engaging with the audience. But that isn't funny, it's just strange, because it almost feels more like it wants to be a Kaufman film, where it's, like, I'm thinking of Ending Things, where it wants to look at the zombie genre and look at, what essentially is a very simple zombie, an event causes the dead to rise, and they are overtaking a small town, and we are being introduced to these small town characters, and as they are being killed off. And it almost feels like he's not that interested in that, and that he's feeling obliged to tell that story, but frankly his attentions are elsewhere because of these strange sequences, like the conversations between Adam Driver and Bill Murray, where they just break the fourth wall and talk about the script or talk about the soundtrack. And then there are strange things other than that, like the fact, frankly, the best part of the film is probably Tilda Swinton, who plays this, it's believed Scottish character, this mortician who is very odd, and the community doesn't know quite how to deal with her. And she also seems to have samurai swords, and of course that all comes into play during the zombie apocalypse. But the strange thing about it is the fact that, considering how weird the story is and how weird the characters are, her strangeness is not out of place. It's not like a small town where everyone's sort of got small town ideas, and then she's the weirdo, and therefore she stands out. There are lots of characters, and they are all weird in their own particular brand, and I think that, even though she is the highlight, it makes her strangeness less conspicuous. And then, I get that there are certain moments where Jim Jarmusch is bringing in characters like the out-of-towners, the people from Cleveland, and you see plot beats and moments where you think, oh, you're setting this up, this character has this interaction, this is where this is going, or the gas station guy who everyone refers to as Bilbo, and you think, oh, he's sort of being put down, and, even though there's a weird moment where people will call him that who have no connection to each other, almost, again, like in that strange, I want to say Lynchian, but it's not really. It's like pseudo-sub-Lynchian kind of way. David Lynchian, as in. And, yeah, it's just, and it sets all these plot beats and characters up, and then of course it tries to subvert it by saying, oh, you're expecting me to do this, and we've put these characters in this scene, so presumably you were assuming this will happen with them, but I'm going to pull the rug from under you. And that's interesting, but it's not extraordinary, and there is something to be said about both subverting and satisfying audience's expectations. And it's a very careful line to walk for audiences to feel happy that either what they think is going to happen happens, or is completely unexpected, but in a way that still satisfies their sense. It is the Chekhov's gun principle. If you have Chekhov's gun, yes, you can break the rules of Chekhov's gun, but you have to still acknowledge it and subvert it in a way that fully realizes the importance of Chekhov's gun. Whereas if you have Chekhov's gun and you almost point to it and then just ignore it, people are not satisfied. Audiences find that unsatisfactory. And I think that's the problem. This film does things like that, where you think, okay, that's an interesting take on this particular sort of character beat, which you see in other zombie films, but now you've decided to do something else with it, and you go, okay, that's unusual. And the film's just full of all those kinds of things. And I say David Lynch, pseudo sub David Lynchian, because I feel like what this film wants to be is George A. Romero meets David Lynch. That it obviously has a deep understanding of what George A. Romero's Living Dead films were about, and they ultimately did have themes of consumerism or racial tension, or they weren't just slashers with zombies. Slashers can also have complex themes, but they weren't just there for gratuitous violence. That they did have a message to them. And then with David Lynch, of course, it's all about the dreamlike quality and the nature of dreaming and reality, and the idea that characters are not bound by story and archetype, and that actually, if it services the dreamlike nature of a story, a character can break the confines of their chosen path, and you can tell that's sort of the direction he wants to go, is a cross between them. But the film doesn't have the depth to, or the nuance to be able to have complex themes and ideas about society using zombies as a metaphor like a Romero, and it doesn't have the subtlety and tone of a David Lynch film, and so it just feels like almost like a series of sketches tied together around the theme of this small town. But again, like I said, it's not funny enough, and so it's just strange, it's weird. And the horror is pretty good. I mean, there are moments where the zombie attacks it actually fixates on the zombie attacks in a way that even some of the hardened zombie films don't tend to do, where it actually, even some of the harder zombie films tend to at least make the kills quick to some degree, or if they're brutal, there is a certain a way to sanitize it without, while still being incredibly gratuitous. It's a difficult thing to do, but the talented filmmakers have done it. Whereas this actually does have this thing where it fixates on the violence of it, and the sort of the fact that these are people being attacked and they are still victims, particularly with the cafe attack, where the nature of victimization is more apparent than I'm used to in a zombie film. So that definitely caught my attention. And I have to say, I found the film curious. I found the film a very strange and curious watch. I don't regret it. In the same way that I didn't regret watching I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I wish I'm Thinking of Ending Things had not done some of the things that it had done, and I preferred the first half to the second, but I deeply respected what that film was. This, I was intrigued by, and I've definitely left with interesting impressions, but I don't feel like it's entirely worked. I don't know. I'm still in chewing over it, and of course, as I say, this went down like a lead balloon in terms of critical reception. It just was, because again, it wasn't funny enough, it wasn't interesting enough as a zombie film. But I would be dishonest by saying I hated the experience of it, because I was intrigued, at least. I was engaged in the strangeness, particularly towards the end, when it really does do some very peculiar things. But again, I didn't hate them. It was just a very odd choice. And so yeah, this is definitely one that I'm sort of chewing over, forgive the pun. But it's an odd one. It is an odd film. Anyway, Thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because it's all helped me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 250 videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.